Welcome to the main stage again. Welcome to day 3. Is it day 3 or day 4? I can't remember now. Anyway, covered a lot of AV subjects so far, and we've got a highlight today, a very experienced panel of guests today for us, looking at immersive experiences, a bit of a chestnut if ever there was one. I'll roll into it because we've got half an hour. At the end, I'll start from the end, we've got Bart Kresa, who's projection designer and founder of Bart Kresa Studio, who you will know, he's doing a keynote, and he's well known now. He's done some amazing stuff, as you'll probably be seeing throughout the show. Magri, managing director of Sarner International. Blair Parkin, principal of TEECOM. Bryan, I forgot his surname. Bryan Boehme. I couldn't pronounce it correctly. Is it Beams or Beam? Boehme. Bryan Boehme from Christie. And David Willrich from, well, he's the owner, D J Willrich or DJW.
Yeah.
All of whom have an obscene amount of experience creating all kinds of immersive and other experiences within the AV world over a long number of years. So the best people you can have in front of us to really sort of gauge what's involved, your approach to whatever it is about the experience you're creating, and immersivity itself, or what it is. It'd be quite good to kind of gauge the audience here about who you are really, and where you come from. Are you end users? Are you looking to create immersive experiences yourself? Can you raise a hand if you are? I get a rough idea of how we're going to proceed, because we can start a number of levels here. Okay, so perhaps some advice and instructional know-how about how to go about it and proceed on a practical front. Would I be all right with that? You can nod and show enthusiasm if you like. Fantastic, lovely. No phones open either, or there'll be trouble. Thank you. Anyway, so I suppose, David, let's start with you. He wasn't expecting that. I always have a day of being unpredictable. How does it all start? Where does immersivity start?
For us, working predominantly in the museum and themed attraction world, it always starts with story. I hate it when somebody comes up to us and asks us for a given size projector or a given size screen, and I always try to pull them back and say, right, what's the story? What are you trying to do? What is it that you are trying to portray to your guest, visitor, depending on whether you're in the museum world or attraction world, and dig down to what the story is, and then build the experience up from that, and then put build the technology around that, and hopefully have the right technology for the right story. Predominantly, I guess now projection, which comes then to the immersion. But I mean, it's one thing immersing people in projection and in an environment, but unless that story is right and you're portraying that story and the technology is invisible, you failed. If the technology is first and foremost, it's a failure in my book.
Well, that's the problem with AV, isn't it? Where do you start? People always automatically think of technology without thinking about what their aim, goal and vision is, and what the story is they're telling. Is that all too often a big mistake, David?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Ross, you've been on the thick end in a similar sort of role, haven't you, for a while?
Yes, I think I agree 100% with David. It's always a challenge.
I can see the pain on your face instead.
Especially when a client comes up with leading the request using the technology. You know, I've seen this at the exhibition, or I've seen these VRs, can we have the same for our project? And trying to find an application when you've got the technology, it's quite a challenge. So we very much like to work with the concept first, what the story is, what we want to try to achieve, and then look at the technology as a solution, and try not to be the technology at the forefront, because it gets dated very easily as well. And when we're talking immersiveness as well, people think about VR, AR, XR, which is very difficult from a practical point of view. We found many issues with the technology, we found issues with the operation, we found issues how you manage big numbers of people. You know, it's a one-to-one technology at the moment. So I think it's evolving fast. I think it's always keeping an open mind on what's coming on the market. But from a practical point of view, we found that there are numerous issues in actually using what is a mass-produced product for in a commercial environment, and that's been difficult for us. So we've gone more with the immersiveness using projection, scenic, steaming, sound effects, and also takes it beyond just the user interface, which is a one-to-one experience as opposed to a group experience.
I think an important thing is that the technology can't fill the imagination gap, and if the imagination's not there, and there's a dependency on technology, which frequently there is, then you have to work really hard with a design group or client to make sure that they're going to use the storyline they've got, or even rethink the storyline and get that working.
I mean, Bart, you're at the top of the creative chain in a sense. I mean, your reputation speaks for itself, really. But how do you approach? It's difficult to get into your head for a minute how you approach a new idea, and how it develops in your head, and what tools you decide are most appropriate for the art you're trying to create. If I can call it art, I mean, what do you call it? I mean, it's
Yes, I think about your question and then what you're talking about, because we happen to be in so many different situations and environments, just because I have been loving projection for about 30 years now, and I find myself in a corporate environment. You know, we do events like parties, rock and roll concerts, theme park attractions. So, you know, story is very important. It's not always like that, you know. So it depends on like what it is, because sometimes it is about being upfront, and sometimes it's about pulling back. Like when we work on the award shows, where, you know, after the award show there's an event and people come. We want people to enjoy themselves, have a drink, you know, talk. So we have to kind of stand back a little bit. We're in the background. But in the theme park, we can be like the main player. So is this kind of like, am I answering the question, or like?
Yes, I know. Thing is, I don't know this. I have to rely on a number of very different people coming from all different perspectives to give us some idea, but the range of perceptions there are about how we tackle this subject. To the AV community, immersivity can mean so many different things, and it's difficult to practice. We're a practical industry, so how do you practically implement that, and where do you start in that process that doesn't allow you to leap to technology first and makes you step back a bit to decide what you really want to achieve with it?
Beside the story, I need to learn about the space, understand, you know, the size of it, all of the conditions, you know, where it is, if it's dark or not. And then I've been doing this over the years. When I choose the gear, I just look and I know, you know, it's kind of like that. It's like 20 projectors or 30 or 50. So, you know, I kind of see it in space.
It sort of evolves you to go along, really. Because it is a sort of creative process with you, isn't it?
The creative process is like once I learned about the space, and then get down to like how much gear it takes to fill that environment, then it's kind of like very similar to what happens in the movie studios or animation houses, where we start with the sketches, mood boards, then we go into a design phase, and then we want to make sure that we're on the same page with the client, because if we're not, we're just wasting time, and, you know, we don't want to do that. So once the sketches and mood boards are approved, we move into the design phase, and then after the design is approved, it's animation. After animation is done, we have to prepare the files for the playback. So depending on the system, you know, it could be like splicing them, rendering them in different formats that the video server can work with, and then there's the output. And we always use two systems, you know, the system A and system B. They work together, because when system A fails, you know, we switch to system B. And at the end, you know, it's all about the experience, you know, of the audience. So that's very important to me, because like in my world, I want to make people happy, and I want to bring some love. You know, I'm not really interested in like the drama and what happens in the movies, shooting and all that stuff. You know, so we're just about happiness and love.
Well, you're dealing with the emotional side, aren't you? You're creating the emotional response to the art you're creating, in a sense, aren't you? Which is quite often what we completely forget about. You know, the immersivity is there to create a feeling and emotion with us, that we react to something. It's not just a technical process. It's something that conspires to achieve something which you can't define technically, but you can define emotionally, and that's what we're trying. That's probably the unquantifiable element of creating an experience of some kind.
Can I say one more thing?
Sorry.
You know, because you were talking a lot about projection, and then what happens is that technology got to a point where with the laser projection and the color, the brightness, it's so much easier to achieve this today because people just respond to it, When you put a lot of color in space, it makes people happy, So I'm just saying, like, comparing to what was happening 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, today's, I think that technologically, we're in a, like, really good place,
Blair, you were involved with a lot of, I'm going to go into the second, Brian, just going to go for the artists. You were involved with a lot of the front-end projects and all the early morning planning and thought and so on.
Immersivity means so many different things, but I go to my reference points. I have 2 immersive experiences I will never forget, and then I build from there. And I'm a technologist and a theatre designer, but I'm not the idea generator. I know that, and I fit myself in with the team, as you were saying. The idea is where you have to start. Someone has to have an idea, and then the team has to work on how to deliver that idea. But I use my reference points. My two immersive experience reference points are, I used to be very involved in delivering scientific visualization caves. That's a whole nother 30-minute session. But a rear projected room in which you put scientific data in a way that humans can understand it. And I had designed and developed the space, the technology, and delivered a number of them around the world. And I always found them very, very fascinating and engaging. And then one day I went to University College London, where I had been part of the team that had built the system there. And I stood inside my own DNA strand. I recommend it. If anyone ever gives you the chance to stand inside your own DNA strand, you should do it, because suddenly you start understanding things, not as a scientist, but as a human being. It appeals to all the emotive part of you, even though it's explaining something that's deeply scientific. So emotion, as you say, is another part of that. But then there's all of the senses. So my other immersive experience was I had fully conscious neurosurgery on my shoulder, my arm, and my wrist. So 3 entry points with noises and smells. No pain until afterwards. And that's an hour and a half of my life I never want to repeat, ever. However, your hearing, your smell, your focus on detail, because your vision is mostly taken away from you in surgery. The people are very close to you, there's a tent over you, this sort of thing. So you're suddenly unbelievably aware of everything else. The smell, the hearing. And so I realized that as we develop immersive experiences, we can't just focus on projected images or spatial sound systems. We have to think about the entire environment that the human is going to experience the experience in. And my rant, where not to start, my rant isn't about don't start with a projector, because I've been working with projectors since I was about this high, so I like starting with projectors. Probably the wrong place, but I just innately do it. My rant is starting with a building. Unless you have identified the architect as the idea generator, having someone tell you, by the way, here's the building and we're going to do this in it, it's the wrong place to start. That's my rant.
Brian, I can imagine you and I standing in the middle of a DNA strand. I think we'd make a good couple.
I found that very...
We'd probably be reinventing it, I think, really. But you're on both sides of all this. You've got a hell of experience in most of this area. How does a developer adapt the technology to what the application is now requiring? I mean, it's a tough gig for a supplier, really, and a developer of technology, isn't it?
I think the first thing we have to do is listen. Listen to people like this who tell us what their inspirations are and where they want to go. And then we have to be able to develop products that allow them to take that imagination and do whatever they want with it. Expanding color space, being able to create higher frame rates, all those kind of things are the technical side of what we do, but it really allows these guys to have a bigger canvas to work with and to have more freedom to do what they want to do.
How far are we understanding customers' needs like that? I mean,
well, that's really kind of my role, is to really work with the customers more directly. We actually reach out to not only end users, but artists, consultants, who will really kind of give us that feedback We invite them to come into the factory to get to know our engineering teams and really kind of help us understand what's going on. I think one of the most interesting sessions I've ever been in that way was we had some technical folks in from Universal Studios, and one of my engineers went to the whiteboard as he was going to write on the whiteboard as to what our new product was going to be. He turned over and he handed the marker to the gentleman from Universal and said, "Why don't you tell us what we should be developing in the product?" And that was the moment it kind of clicked for me, that we really need to be more in tune with what these gentlemen need, more than what we think we need to do.
How far do you think the vendors are going to go in that sort of? We're getting a bit of feedback here, aren't we? Are we all right, Neil, Sam? There. Okay. How far are manufacturers going to go? I mean, we're in the middle of a major product bunfest here, aren't we? But I don't see much leadership going on.
As a consumer of manufacturers' information, I should perhaps answer that from my perspective, because this is a really good canvas to answer that on. There is a complete spectrum of awareness of how to deal with the creative industries, the consulting teams, the production teams. So I'll take Christie. I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago. They started a major consulting program, and they very kindly gave me an air ticket, which was fabulous. Big seat. Don't normally go in the big seats. Really good. Thank you. Flown to Canada. Yeah, any Canadians in the audience? Canadian winters, not great. And they showed me my first true laser projector. And I was working on a project. I knew I wasn't the idea generator. I was an idea stakeholder. But I immediately, from the demonstration, phoned the client, the idea generator, and said, "Have you sent that purchase order out yet?" And they went, "No, stop. We have found something even better." And then we flew the client and so on and so forth. And so part of the challenge we have is, how do we know about all of this stuff that we can use to take the ideas and communicate them? And it's really, really difficult. Shows like ISE are really good for this, and some manufacturers are really aware that they have to talk to people other than their dealers or their installers. They have to give us ideas, and we're hungry for them. And some people have programs to do that, and others don't. And then the don'ts are usually the ones at my door complaining, "Why didn't you design the product in?" "Well, we didn't know you made it," is usually the answer. So,
But is part of the thing, I mean, here we have an astonishing array of technology, and yes, you can, if you're pointing to the right one, you can probably take the conversation further. But do you think the vendors here are doing more to sell than explaining the which applications are best used and going that further? It's sort of missing that instructional element, I think. We're doing our best to educate people and to refine thought. But they are great, these events. They go everybody in one spot, but they're not so good for guiding people through how to look and how to refine their applications and how to best use the technology to get the most out of what they need to do in the business or in live events or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? I'm a bit sceptical sometimes with all this.
I think it depends on the product slot. And you also go in cycles. I mean, like Blair was saying with laser projectors came along and there was a big race with all the manufacturers to get the best laser projectors out. So everybody gets the laser projector out, and then they say, "Well, what do you really want? What brightness level do you want? What lens range do you want?" And that's when the listening starts. And I think with projectors, with pretty much all the major manufacturers now, we're in the listening phase, because the product's there, it's stable, it's reliable, and they want to increase market share. So then it's listen. And you get that with different items. You get it with extenders, you get it with audio equipment. I mean, each product seems to kind of go through that cycle where, in the early days of Dante, do you want or don't you want Dante in your audio products? And then suddenly everybody's got it. What do you want next? So I think we tend to go in those cycles. Listen, not listen. We've got the technology out. Now we'll listen. These guys do listen, though.
Ross, from a practical point of view, I mean, what applications or markets do you think are ripe for immersivity? I mean, which wouldn't you really go further in, and which ones do you think are worth exploring? I mean, well, all of you have been on the cutting edge of doing new stuff, but in a way they tested the technology in a sense where it may not have been wholly appropriate to put it in there, but you've tested and taken it into new areas. Are there any sort of things we've learned from all that about what's best suited to it?
Yes, I mean the technology is always not the thing that should lead the design. I think as we all discussed, is we start with the design and then we find the technical solutions for it. I think it's a mistake when you come to places like this, and sometimes you get really excited because you see some of the technology, you think, wow, that would do a great job, but then you have to find an application for it. I think it's much better to start with the concept, the idea, and then come to people like yourself and say, okay, this is what we want to achieve. Because sometimes what I find with manufacturers is they focus on a product that everyone else is doing. So, the challenges of trying to decide which screen to use or which projector, and why use Samsung and not Panasonic or Christie's or other manufacturers. And it'd be nice to see more manufacturers who actually think out of the box and try to find some of the challenges that we find with installations, where maybe it's size, maybe it's the lens, maybe it's the throw distance. And it sounds like a lot of energy is wasted on potentially, for example, driving the lumens of projectors. And not everyone is after the brightest projector. It's very much, I think, about internet connection. It's sold of how fast is your download speed. And we've gone to a point that is so fast that no one needs the speed faster to download a film in 3 seconds instead of 5 seconds. And the same with projectors. You see laser, 30,000, 50,000 lumens, which is great for a certain market, but no one's really focusing on maybe the lower brightness, the better quality image, the issues we have with soft edge blending, for example, where we've got the banding on the screens. So it's these areas that would help us as a company and as a product, where we've got museums, we've got visitor attractions. And sometimes there isn't this communication. So I think there is scope there to grow and opportunities for manufacturers to maybe look at the challenges we have from day to day, as opposed to look at the marketing side of, we've got the brightest projector on the market, which is only, applicable for certain small percentage of the market. So that's, I think, where we come from as a company.
That's the thing, Brian, is about appropriateness of technology and how you develop your product sets to match what market is demanding them. It must be, it's squeezing different functionality out of established sets to just widen them out a bit, just to hopefully match that demand when it comes on board. It must be quite difficult to plan ahead for that.
Well, I think we really look at how we're going to build products for different markets by having building blocks within our products that allow us to build products that do meet each of those different market needs. I agree with you, and I'll just state we don't have the brightest projector in the world right now. That isn't our goal. Our goal is actually to build products that are going to meet the needs of our clients, and I absolutely agree with you that it's most important to really understand what you want to do with the product, and that sometimes blending is one of the things that is most important. It's one of the things that Christie has focused on for over 12 years already, is how to be able to warp and blend images well. And all these gentlemen here have something to do with projection mapping or warping or blending images in their careers, and I think they would attest that we've actually really looked at that as what we have to do better, more than just that specification of brightness or some crazy dynamic contrast ratio number that they want to put out there. Yeah. We're far less about the numbers and more about the listening to the developers and people who are doing the work, to try to give them the tools to really let them do that. That's kind of my mantra. It's what I've done for 17 years with Christie, is really kind of come in and say, we want to listen first. We want to do that kind of work first. I spent a lot of time with David at TEA meetings, SATE. I also noticed we talked a lot about that here today. Storytelling, architecture, technology. Yeah. And it equals that experience that we're all here talking about today.
How courageous can people be? I can imagine whatever you want, you get. When it comes to technology, you can really create that vision. I mean, it must be a wonderful world to work in. But I can imagine us mere mortals, have to think of budgets and to see what was achieved by someone else with fairly standard kit. And there's a temptation, I suppose, to really focus on sort of packaged stuff that's been tried before, rather than, it depends on the client, obviously, that to go for something that hasn't been used before and actually enter a new realm, thinking that, well, that technology could be good if we can trial it and try new things, which inevitably you come across at some point. But is there too much of a temptation with immersivity to just hope it's sort of packaged are we moving towards a packaged immersivity type solution, or is the market genuinely open to try whatever technology you feel you can explore with to create something new? That's where I don't get with AV. You're an extreme example of the amazing things you can do with it, but I imagine the rest of the market is forced to have so many budget and technology constraints. It's not as creative as it could be.
I disagree. I think it's more open than it's ever been.
I'd rather hope you say that. Good, okay. Bart, what do you think? I mean, am I being unfair here?
Well, I have a lot to say about that, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it in zero time.
Don't worry, you're okay for a minute. Kate might give me a black eye in a minute, but anyway, go on. I'm sure we'll find for a minute.
Well, it comes down, there are two things that come to my mind. One is the relationships, community. Because in our work, sometimes, as an example, in December we did a project with 92 projectors, 30 case and 60 to 20 case on a week notice. So unless I had, good relationships and support, that would never happen. Basically, I was calling people and saying, asking, are you available? Okay, go to the airport and get on the plane and come and help, It was like that. So community, relationships, I think is important. And the other very important thing is doing a good quality job. Because that's, technology is great, but we don't have enough designers in our community that understand and know how to design projections properly. So what happens is they get this amazing gear and then, don't do an amazing job with it, and it kind of takes our whole, community, or what's the other word, there's a corporate word for that. It takes it down. Industry, So it's important, to do a good job, and I don't know, maybe be honest sometimes, if the job is too big, ask for help or don't take it, Because I've seen pretty big jobs that were just really poorly executed, and not because of the technology, it was because of the design. So, I opened an academy for projection design last month, and my focus is to bring more good quality of design into the community.
Just briefly, David, you're disagreeing. You think there are fantastically affordable solutions out there that we don't need to worry too much about losing creativity by the choices we have?
I think in most cases that if you come across a client that's been to theme park, we get it a lot in museums. They've been to theme parks, seen something big, and then we want that, but we can't afford it, and you come back to the story, bring them around another way, and invariably you're scaling it down anyway. So whereas in a theme park experience they've got top end 25,000 ancillary projectors, in a museum it's 6,000. So, but you've still got to use it in an imaginative way. And I think there's so many tools out there. Particularly again with projection now, where you can do projection so well at all levels. When I started the industry, I go and look at an IMAX theatre and think, wow, and that was always that was way up there. And for a museum to have an IMAX was something else, and they never thought they were going to have anything on that level. Well, now you can have a 2-meter widescreen that's giving you better quality with a 4K projection on it than you get off on IMAX, and it's affordable. So yes, I think it is affordable, and I think it's thinking what your design goal is, I agree with what Blair said about the building, but it's the building, it's the design, it's not just the technology, it's, as Ross said, the scenography that's around it, it's that whole environment. And I think what's even more important in public exhibitions is doing something that you just cannot have in the home. You alluded to virtual reality, that can be a home experience. You're creating an experience that's a group experience in a completely different environment. That's an immersive experience.
Fantastic. Well, we're running a bit over, but time for a very quick question, I suppose, before I get lynched. Ooh, 2 hands coming up. Yes. Oh, we'll have to throw this at you. Who's good at throwing? Go on, David. I think you're fantastic. Well done. Talk right into it, if you would.
Yeah. Okay, this is more a question directed towards Bryan over here from Christie.
Okay, quick one.
all we've discussed right now, in what I've noticed in this entire panel discussion, was about how developers and manufacturers need to listen. Well, then you're always only going to have reactive products. You're listening to the problems of other people, but you're never going to have pioneering products if you're only listening. And for an artist to understand the technical part is not going to be possible. And maybe y'all can create a bridge of having more artists as part of your team when you're developing products. I mean, what do you feel about that?
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
I only heard about half of that question. So.
About how that, yes. It's about having artists in the creative process of developing new technology.
Yes.
How do artists? I'm sorry.
Having artists involved in the development of products.
Well, I think it's a bit of outreach that we need to do, and we try to do that by not just coming to events like this, but really reaching out more into the artist type events that are out there, and we also then try to work through consultants and some of the other designers who really know the artists, who really know the people who are going to be at that ground level to try to reach and get more of that information. I think it is difficult for us to actually get it to the detail levels that perhaps you would like us to, but I can tell you that is my goal, and we do try to strive to do that better.
Okay. Actually, you do that a lot, though, through things like the through
very
TEA
quick
events.
We do. And that's exactly.
Okay, very quick one, John.
I just wondered if the panel could point us towards any
Go right up there,
real-world
John.
examples. Obviously, we've got Bart's outside, but it would be just good to hear.
I can't hear you, John.
You can't
So
hear?
right up there. You know,
Right
get
there?
right in. Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
What about some real-world examples of projection mapping that have really impressed the panel? Just for the end users in the audience.
Real-world examples of projection mapping that really impressed the panel. Wow, there's so many. But
Obviously,
hey,
Bart.
you know,
Examples of what?
what can I say?
Projection mapping that really were impressive.
End of day shows in Disney parks.
Well, we're going to have one later. We're going to have one later, I have to say,
Yeah.
about two.
Well, I think the
presentations.
most impressive one, I mean, from like our work, it's the parade at the Universal Studios Japan.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
created we created an environment with 47 facades that are all projected, you know, and then they are sort of the world for parade that goes through, and then the main float has an Optimus Prime robot that is 6 meters tall, and then the robot is collapsing and then opening up every 2.5 minutes, and we're tracking the projections and then, you know, creating the whole look of it. It's probably the most complex, difficult thing that was ever done in our industry. When I started, people said, like, you know, it cannot be done, but anyway, it's there. So when you go, if you go to Japan, you can see it. I don't know, I
Okay.
think that this is the one, you know.
Very, very briefly, we're very over time here.
And I
So.
think we got the TIA award for that too.
So
Yeah.
my most impressive experience with projection mapping in the last 12 months is a single DLP projector that costs less than $5,000, projecting onto a 3D white object, which is in a museum in Jordan, telling a story to children who have never been in a museum before and don't understand why they have been dislocated and live in a camp. And for the $5,000, the impact on lives is unbelievable. So that with technology, we don't always have to spend a lot of money to make a difference. If we have a good idea and we've got a good story to tell and we've got a great audience, then we can do it, you know, with 5,000 lumens as opposed to 50,000.
Absolutely
So
right. I think I found the Tank Museum at Birmingham one of the most moving, with very little AV in it, actually. I absolutely run. Right, thank you so much. Bart, Ross, Blair, Brian, and David, thanks very much indeed. And thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.